About jazz and Kerouac. Last Friday I was invited to a jazz club by my son. Anders Boson Jazz Ensemble swung nicely to good food and a Pilsner. During the evening I came to think about how I once started listening to jazz. It all started with a book. When I was a young 16-year-old, I was told to read Jack Kerouac's novel On the Drift by a slightly older and more well-read friend. It took me a few years to get hold of the book, but I finally found it and read it. What mainly grabbed me was that Kerouac described jazz as I had experienced a lot of other music, but definitely not jazz. The jazz I had heard then was what was played on the radio, and I experienced it as terribly boring and soporific. In the novel On the Drift, Sal Paradise and his friend Dean Moriarty hitchhike around the U.S. and make their way from one jazz club to the Spirit and digs bebop. The way Kerouac describes jazz made me curious. I realized that there must be something in jazz that I had not yet heard and understood. What he described was miles from the dreary dull jazz I had heard on the radio. So I started searching, with the definite goal that one day I would learn to appreciate jazz, but it was difficult to find my way into such a large genre with so many artists and bands I didn't know. This was also a time long before the internet, Spotify and YouTube. People were referred to the record stores. I started browsing the vinyl under the label jazz, and bought both good and less good records, but slowly I got into it. At the jazz club Nefertiti in Gothenburg, I was finally able to experience something of what Kerouac had described in the book. The presence in the moment is somehow greater in jazz, which is based so much on improvisation, than in other music genres. In a good solo, you can be one with the music, right then and there. It can rarely be repeated. Literature may not change the world, but it can definitely influence and change one's life. Without Kerouac, no jazz, and that would have been boring for me. Mattias is an author, editor, and illustrator. Thank you for listening to or watching this episode. Please like, comment and subscribe.